Sorry, guys, a little late today. Here's roll the intro. Good morning, everybody, and welcome to Hanging with the Hammer. Hopefully, we get a couple people in here real soon. And today's topic is I wanted to talk a little bit about drum magazines and the importance of Modern Drummer magazine in my life and my knowledge of drums and things like that. Um, this week, I just got my June issue of Modern Drummer magazine, the June issue, and it's July. Something's up with Modern Drummer, but they switched hands in the last year to a new publisher, and the new publisher is actually in Boca Raton, so he's not too far from me. And I think he's moved the whole operation down here to Florida. So I think that's part of the problem with why the magazine is not on schedule right now. Good morning, CCM drummer. So anyhow, with that said, I thought that, it'd be a good time to talk about Modern Drummer's influence on my life and my knowledge of drums and where I've attained a lot of knowledge. My wife used to be a writer for Modern Drummer magazine back in the 80s and 90s. And today, the magazine's changed a lot. It's changed a lot since those early days of me reading it, where it was focused on the record companies would put drummers out there, and of course there was the famous drummers of the day, the Buddy Riches and Danny Serafins and everything else. Good morning, Sean Woodley. So anyhow, Modern Drummer's changed, and it's changed a lot. And this month's Modern Drummer, when I first saw the cover, it had the young drummer Nandy Bushell, who I think was in one of the commercials for I don't know, a store in London where they had I think they were playing Don't You Forget About Me, kind of. I think that was the song they were playing. It was a couple years ago. She was probably 9 at the time. Now she's 11. So when I got this magazine, I thought to myself, what is this? Is this where we're going? And then I opened it, and what I found inside the magazine was one of our YouTube community guys right in the middle of the magazine, a guy named Terry Keating, who a lot of you guys know Terry. And you probably follow his channel, Bonzolium. And he's kind of one of the experts on John Bonham drumming on the YouTube. And he's got a lot of followers. And anyhow, to find him with his own article in Modern Drummer magazine kind of said, wow, maybe this is where we're going. And maybe this is the new frontier for the industry. Is now the drummers of today are the drummers on YouTube. So I was kind of excited to see him get that shot there. And he mentioned some of the other great players out there. A guy named George Flutis was one of them, who I follow a lot. He also does the John Bonham drumming, but he's a great jazz drummer too. And long and the short of it is just seeing that this is where we're going and this is what's happening made me want to ask the question, are you guys still reading drum magazines? Do guys read drum magazines? I mean, got to be honest, they're going to go to a new format, a new pricing schedule for next year's subscription when mine runs out, and it looks pretty steep to me for the hard copy. And it seems like they're pushing us towards an electronic copy and access to a whole library of magazines. Of course, I've got 45 years of magazines sitting over to the side of me. So I've actually been reading it that long, and I have that much physical copies of magazines hanging around here. But researching it's not easy. You know what I'm saying? So that's the thing. So I'm just wondering what your thoughts are today, guys, on the topic of drum magazines. Do you guys still read drum magazines? Remember, this show is made by your questions. Your questions make the show. So if I don't have questions, we don't really have much of a show. So, and I can just talk on and on about things. But that's kind of what I wanted to talk about today. I want to say, how has the drum magazines and the internet changed the way you read magazines and read print paper, newspapers and stuff have changed. I think there's a lot of information there, but we go to Google usually to find it and the internet to find it. and we're not really searching the libraries as much anymore. I have a good friend who's one of my wife's good friends from college, and he's a librarian, and that's changed completely how you research in a library today because of Google and everything else. So I'm looking to see your questions. Anybody have any questions today? Any thoughts today you guys want to talk about, or you just want to hear me ramble on about whatever I can think of to ramble on about for you guys? Welcome, Junior Lung. I appreciate you being here from Brazil. So your questions make the show. And if I don't have questions, I don't have much of a show, but you guys all know that. Last week we got into some interesting stuff too. We talked about equipment. So that's always a hot topic. So any questions today, guys? Let's see who else shows up, and we'll see where this goes today. So 5 minutes in, and we're trying to talk about the drum magazines. So let me tell you about some of the drum magazines that I've actually read. Okay, because Modern Drummer is one of the drum magazines. That's a good point. Good morning, Chadwick, for being here. The loss of Dusty Hill and Joey Jordison. It's been a rough week, hasn't it? This week. Good morning. It's been a rough week with people passing away. Yeah, definitely. Let's talk about that for a second, and then we'll jump back onto the topic of drum magazines. Dusty Hill, ZZ Top, bass player, longtime bass player. By the way, ZZ Top was the longest running continuous band without any changes ever for rock music. I mean, ZZ Top started in 1971 and they never had a lineup change. So added up, what's that, 71, 81, 91, 2001, 50 years, no lineup change. So the loss of Dusty Hill to ZZ Top is, what can I say? I mean, he was a great bass player. ZZ Top had a certain sound. They played that sound very well. It was blues rock based. I have a good friend of mine who if I wanted to pull somebody on to talk about Dusty Hill, I would have pulled my friend Dave Jones on from New Jersey, who I've worked a lot with in playing wise in different scenarios. He was a huge ZZ Top fan, and he loved the playing of those guys. So he's more of an expert on it than me. Frank Beard was always a get it done kind of drummer, laid it in the pocket, and I'm sure that Dusty Hill's bass playing is part of what that was all about. They kind of made a great trio, rock trio, and they're going to be sadly missed. Now, Joey Jordison, that's kind of I'm a young guy. That's a huge loss. And lose your life in your 40s is a huge loss. I don't know what was around that. I haven't read anything on that aspect of it, but I think the music community's lost a lot this week in losing two innovators. Okay, Joey Jordison was definitely an innovator with Slipknot. Of course, that style of music is kind of a little bit on the outside for my taste, so I haven't really studied it. But to say that he didn't take that aggressive metal music to another level with Slipknot, I think we've seen all different types of strands of hardcore metal. I don't even know what they call these genres. I've heard everything from Norwegian metal to, I mean, it's all over the place now. There's so many different groups. But what he did was pretty amazing, and you got to give him credit for it. And he did it in his own masked way, so he couldn't really tell who he was, which wasn't anything new. That's something Kiss did a long, long time ago. But to bring that kind of thing back was kind of another aspect to their show and what made them the way they were. So I don't really have anything else to say about the two deaths, though, this week, because I do know they are losses to the community. And, of course, we pretty much have a lot of adulation for our rock stars. We love our rock stars, and we love our artists. So it's always a loss when somebody dies, and it gives you the perspective of how short life is. Chadwick said, Texas Shuffle, Frank Beard. Yes, Frank Beard and his Texas Shuffle is incredible. Frank Beard was a get-it-done guy. He knew how to play in the pocket. I mean, they really reinvented themselves during the MTV era. They went from doing that blues stuff to really just lock down simple pocket songs, and they really broke free with the video era. You know, they were I don't think they were playing anything all that hard. It was just that they played it very disciplined, and those videos were very eye-catching, and it really pushed them to another stratosphere in the 80s during the real era of MTV. It's hard to talk about MTV, you know what I mean, in this world, because MTV is such a mess today. It's not MTV, it's not music television at all. But when MTV started in the 80s, when I was in my early 20s, I was fascinated by this concept. I mean, the 70s was watching Don Kirshner's rock concert and the Midnight Special and any other little event like the Tonight Show, watching a band show up on the Tonight Show. And then all of a sudden, now we had 24 hours a day, 7 days a week music videos from these artists. And ZZ Top jumped in with the right look in the in their videos and the right sound for the time, which the 80s was a very simplistic time. I mean, it was the era of the drum machine. Yes, that's totally correct. It was the era of the drum machine, and that's what they did. I don't know if Frank Beard played it or if it was a drum machine in some respects. I think there was a level of both in those productions at that point in time. But the drum machine, the Simmons drums, the very simple tom fills. That was a time for drummers in the early 80s, like, were we going to still have a reason to have a drummer on stage? We can just put this box on stage. But the box doesn't have any personality or attitude. So having that personality and attitude is what drummers brought to the stage. And a band like ZZ Top needed that drummer in there to be able to lay it in. But Frank Beard, definitely, he just sat there in the pocket, man. He had a certain way of doing it. So remember, your questions make the show. If I don't have questions, that's right, I just put that up. If I don't have questions, I don't have much of a show. So looking for your questions today. Okay. Good morning. Uzi's on again with us. And Uzi, you did tell me your name. Josh, good morning. We learned to play with the box. Yes, we all, you know what, the box and the click track, that is something that we all had to learn how to play with in the 80s. I remember when we first started bringing drum machines on a stage, I was in a band and we had a sequencer and I had an HR-16, Elisa's drum machine, and we were playing, about half the set was played to the clock. You know, I was on the clock, but clocked to the drum machine and the sequencer, clocked together, giving me some kind of groove click to deal with. That's what I meant by clocked. It was all put together and we were locked in there. That was totally a different time. You know what I mean? And today it's like, that's all it is. I mean, there's click everywhere, and a lot of shows today are all on click the whole show. Most of your country acts are all on click the whole show. The church bands I've played in churches where it's just click, everything's on click. Click doesn't go away. It's kind of funny that that's where we've gotten to, you know, and learning how to play with a click is a requirement today. If you cannot play with a click, you're in trouble. But back when I first started playing with a click, my first album I did in Nashville in '87, you were listening to the click, but you weren't looking at the click on Pro Tools. You were listening because we were listening to the click being there with the 24-track tape. And our ears don't hear the click the same way as looking at it on a screen and seeing it like, oh, it's a little ahead, a little behind, a little ahead, a little behind, a little ahead. Our ears go, oh, that sounds good. It's got like a groove to it. So all the great players learned how to play with the click. And one of the things that was really important to playing with the click that I've learned is making sure your one is there. And that's where I usually have my biggest problem with the click, is I usually put my kick a little ahead. And that's a problem for a studio drummer. Most of the great studio drummers are dead on the one. And then the other trick is laying back the 2 and the 4 on the click. And that took a while to figure that one out a little bit. And when I do that well, it sounds great. You know, it's that Nashville thing, sitting back on the click. But back in the day, man, it was all over the place. Let's see what Josh says. What is your Everest? A drummer or a song that you hear and you think, no way I can even attempt that? That's a great question. That's a good question. Um, let's see. Uh, for me, I thought it was Asia, to be honest, and then I tackled that one. Today, for me, I think some of the jazz fusion I want to play. I was trying to work on a Chick Corea song, "The Leprechaun," that Steve Gadd played on, and I realized I'm not even close. So you probably won't see that one coming out anytime soon. I think a lot of the playing real jazz type stuff and trying to replicate something from a jazz record and taking off the drums and playing to it, that's kind of an Everest for me. From the rock world stuff, I think playing the prog stuff, like Exact. The reason I don't do Rush is because I have a tendency to put a little bit too much of me in things, and the Rush guys would go freak out. If I played a Neil Peart lick the wrong way, I would hear about it. And I'm just not a Neil Peart head. Same thing with the John Bonham stuff. It's like if you don't play the John Bonham stuff right in there the way he played it, even if you're playing that feel of John Bonham, you've got the essence of what he's doing, the bubba da bums, the 16 note triplet thing he does on the feet on some of those songs. If you're getting it, but you're not getting exactly how he did, you'll hear about it. So I tend to like, there's certain drummers I don't try to even emulate because I won't get it exact. I don't even try. So when I did my Asia cover of the Steve Gadd thing, I didn't try to do it like the record. I tried to do like, let me see what I could put in those fills. I knew it would be influenced by the Gadd thing. So that was an Everest moment in my drum cover career, was doing the Steely Dan Asia song from the Asia album. So I think that's it. But I'd like to try to attempt some more of the jazz stuff that I really enjoy listening to. Another song is Some Skunk Funk by the Brecker Brothers. My friend Jim Flies 2 did it. Jim Huey, great drummer, and he did a really excellent job of it. I'm thinking about going back to it. I used to play that when I was a kid. I used to practice that song. So those are kind of the things. I may also want to try some Kansas or Yes songs. Of course, there's the block issues with those on YouTube. So, but that's a great question. Let's see. Chadwick had another question I saw. What was your wife's music you covered this morning? Oh, well, thank you for asking that question. That is music from my wife's album, Toward the Lamb. It was recorded in between 2001 and 2004. It was recorded, and we actually mixed the album in 2004, got it mastered in 2005, and released in 2005. And the interesting thing about that album is that was the first album I tried everything on. I mean, I produced it. I found the musicians to play on it. It's got all live musicians on it. There are no machines on the album. Everything is live. I do have a couple loops. I did some looping things, but that was done inside of the program, the DAW Digital Performer. But I put in all the musicians I found down here in South Florida. We had just moved to Florida in 2000. So I really had to restart my career in 2000. I left a 40-year career in New Jersey where I knew people, a lot of people, and people were using me for a lot of things. Then I moved down here, I knew nobody. So I got connected with a couple people early on, playing at doing some freelance church things. I got a name and people started calling me for that. And then I started meeting musicians. And I met this one really great guitar player. His name was Michael Terrell, and he used to be in a band called Mylan Lefevre and Broken Heart. And he was one of the lead guitar players for the band. He toured with them into the 80s, into the 90s, and he was a worship leader at a church and a youth group leader. And I used to do some youth group stuff with him. And he played on my wife's album. He actually played the electric guitar on that song, You Are My King. Now, this album my wife did was all my wife's music. So she had all these little prayer songs, and we took the album and we basically put them together with musicians. She wanted live musicians. Now, my wife, the other part of this story is I'm going through four different company transition of jobs. When we moved down here, my life really kind of flipped. The company I moved down here for went bankrupt, and we went through a bankruptcy and got bought, then got fired, and then went to another company and then got bought and then got fired. And there was a lot going on. And by the time I finished this album in 2005, I'd been through 4 different companies down here. in a year, about 4 year period. So there's a lot to this story. And my wife, we got down here and she got her master's degree, and 6 months down here, she goes, I want to work on my doctorate. And she was in the middle of her doctorate. So when we actually got this album done, which was an album that we decided we wanted to do back in 1990, and I have demos of the 1990 tracks, which none of those made the album, by the way. But we did 3-song demo tape back in 91 without drums because it was done in a small home studio scenario, and the guy did all the programming and stuff using Sound Tools, which was the precursor to Pro Tools. Um, we ended up This ended up being a different album than even what she thought was going to happen to the album. But if you listen to the album, and by the way, the links are on my channel page, my homepage. There's one artist that I feature, and it's my wife's album. All these songs are there if you want to listen to any of them. Any of you guys want to go back and listen. And this song, particular, there's a story to this song. This song was the song I recorded in a bedroom, my 11 by 11 bedroom studio in Coral Springs, because I did not have the studio I have today. I got that in 2005 when we moved here. And I couldn't best the original drum track that the guitar player played to. He kind of locked with me, and I could never, and I moved. I think the track was one of those clicks where I was kind of doing a little moving, and I never could ever replace the track. And I tried about 30 or 40 times on different days. For me to record this meant everybody had to get out of the house. That's what it was. So everybody was out of the house, and I would try to replace the drum track because I knew I wanted a more rocking track to it. Couldn't fix it. Couldn't beat the drum track. So even the drum track I did today, that the one that's I released, is not even close to as good as the track I did, which is kind of funny. But I didn't like the sound of the track I did. And we didn't do sound replacement or anything. We actually got the sounds the old-fashioned way, going through a board, going through compressors, going through, we reamped a few things. We did a lot of different, more than just plugins too. There was some outboard gear on this one. It was mixed at my friend Steve Cruz's studio in Coconut Creek, and he was using a Yamaha digital board. It was the OQ2 board. It was the bigger board. He had the bigger one, and he had a whole bunch of outboard gear, and there was a lot of outboard gear on it. So it was quite a process. So my wife asked me to play this song, so I said, okay, I'll give it a try. So that's the story behind that. I got about 10 songs I could do, but the whole album is kind of a picture. You don't start on song 5, that's song 5. You start at song 1 and you take it all the way across to song 10, and it tells a story. Every song kind of goes into the next song. There's a lot of segues in it. It's actually it ends up being my Sgt. Pepper almost in some ways, the way we recorded it and put it together. It actually has a picture and a sonic picture to it. And it's terrible background music. I've learned that. I never put it on background anything. And I rarely, when I listen to it, it's a very meditative thing. It's actually that's what it is. So you got a middle song out of context, but that's the story behind it. Thanks for asking that, Chadwick. Josh asked another question. I think those songs that scare us are the songs that we should try to play. That's the hard thing for us drummers that do drum covers. And by the way, hi Claus and everybody else who's out there still. I lost a bunch of you today. I still only got 3 guys, so I lost a whole ton of you guys today. But anyhow, let's see. When I heard Earl taking my takeaway, let's see. When I heard Earl talking, my takeaway is that exposing yourself to different types of music is how you can be better at drumming. That is a good point. That is one of my main points of playing music, is you have to listen to music to get better at music. And one of my students, Sean, was on, or he may still be on, I'm not sure. I tell him that all the time. Listen to music, listen to lots of music. And the more music you listen to, the more you expose yourself to, the more you will keep challenging yourselves to learn different music. Now, for me, the challenge is to listen to new music, believe it or not. That's the hardest thing for me because I've kind of got set in my ways. And part of my problem with new music is really the way we make new music. It's not the music itself necessarily, even though a lot of times the the lyrics do something to me. I enjoy great lyrics, and I'm kind of a mushy kind of guy. So I like to see lyrics that say something. You know what I'm saying? And when the lyrics don't speak to me, it's hard for me to do a song. So if I'm doing a song with lyrics, it has to speak to me. But that being said, the way we create new music today is one where drum parts are not played all the way through. I was just listening to a podcast with Blair Cinta and Kirky B, Kurt Biscara from LA. And they were talking about the new types of recording projects that have made these studio guys have careers still. And there's no record company money anymore. So that whole time of record company money is gone. And these guys came in at the end of that pretty much. Blair more than Kirk Biscara. But they were talking about how the projects they do today are these vanity projects where that's where they get most of their work, is doing projects for guys that have money to lay out and want the best musicians, and they hire the best musicians. So that's cool. But then they were talking about how we construct songs today. And songs are constructed like they go in, if they're going to record a song, the guy will say, okay, I want you to just play some of this type of groove. This is going to I'm going to build the chorus on this. Oh yeah, that's cool. I want this kind of feel for the bridge. And then you play 8 bars of that, and they play it over and over again until they get what they want. And then they go back and they do the verse after the fact. And it's like they piece everything together. Well, that's what I've experienced with a lot of the songs I've played in the last couple of years for people, is I'll go in and they'll be, all right, let's work on the last chorus first and get that out. And then we'll come back and see how you're going to work on the verse. And there's no continuous playing of music, where Chadwick knows this. In Nashville, they used to go in a room and put up the Nashville number system chart, and everybody kind of read it and kind of interpreted it. And you sat there and you blew songs down, and you can get 3 in a day. Well, today, the way we're writing music is ridiculously hard to actually have that kind of cooperative environment. It's made in a production mindset. And I think that's what's hurting the music, because the music has no melody. A lot of times the melodies are built around the chords that came up that make it kind of sound cool in their production. And we're not getting hooks in songs, and the songs aren't one continuous piece anymore. So I think we've lost a lot in music today, and it's really hard for me to listen to that. So that's my challenge, is how can I listen to that music and make it happen? You know what I mean? That's the tough one for me. So let's see. Claus said, agreed, pushing oneself, example, play unfamiliar music is the way forward. Well, that's what we got to do. I'm trying to do that. All right, Chadwick said, do you follow MD online or other old magazines? Thank you for bringing us on topic, Chadwick. I appreciate that. The funny thing is, I've never warmed up to the MD online thing, but I think that's where I'm going to have to go to keep my MD subscription. Is MD's changing their subscription way they do things. The new publisher basically has made it pretty clear that they have changed the way they're going to do things. And he's making it so that the magazine is like $12 an issue or something crazy like that, or $10 an issue, I think it's going to be. So even if you're subscribing, you're going to pay $120 a year for the magazine, which I still get the magazine because I'm still on my old subscription of like $30 for the year. They're going to go to a online format where you can get them brought to your tablet, and then you have access to the whole library for $5 a month. $5 a month, so it's $60 a year. So I'm probably going to have to go to a completely electronic format to stay in any modern drummer. But how much of this magazine do I read anymore? That's the other question. I don't read as much anymore, and I wish I did. And good morning, Tate. Glad to have you on today. So we're talking about, do we read Modern Drummer Magazine, and is it relevant? So I'm going to go back, and I want to point out to those of you that are out here, I've got 6 of you now, and I'm 30 minutes in. Thanks for coming on. This new issue of Modern Drummer Magazine features YouTube drummers in it. And one of the YouTube drummers featured in this magazine is a guy named Terry Keating, who a lot of you guys all love and know. And he is the Bonzolium guy. The Gospel of Bonzo is what the article's called. Great article. I don't know if you guys saw this yet. If you get Modern Drummer, and Tate said the Danny Seraphin issue. Well, of course we have to have that too. That I spent $19 for. $19 for this issue, by the way, to get a reprint of the article I actually have and a new article. And I will say this about the new publisher. The new publisher is saying, we got to take this thing into the 20th century. So he's trying some new things. The magazines feel and look so good. This is like a book, this thing, the Danny Seraphin thing. It's like a book. I mean, I feel like it's a 100-page book almost. You know, it's 105 pages. Great pictures, though. I mean, I got some great shots of Danny and stuff in here. If you're a Danny Seraphin guy, you want this. If you're the Alex Van Halen guy, I'm sure it's the same for Alex Van Halen. They got one on Alex Van Halen. They got one on Chad Smith. Now, I'm not going to buy those. They did one on Neil Peart. There are things that are important to me, of course. So, I mean, that's what we're going to do. But, interesting. Chadwick said, haven't had a Modern Drummer magazine in 20 years. I think that's true for a lot of people today. I think a lot of drummers stop reading magazines. I think the magazine industry, and let me go back and say, I know this, by the way. I know this for a fact. My wife being a journalist for years, writing for Modern Drummer magazine, it has changed. And those magazines are hard to put out, and they're hard to keep money. And what's been keeping magazines alive are advertisers. I don't know if any of you guys have ever seen a magazine. It's called Tape Op Magazine. If you're a recording nut, like I was for years, starting my studio 20 years ago, I found Tape Op Magazine. Tape Op still sends me magazines, by the way, and they are fully funded by the manufacturers of equipment, because recording engineers get Tape Op Magazine. And why do they get it? They leave them in their studio. It's something to have out there in the little room where they're going to sell their, the client's going to sit and wait sometimes, the waiting room or the kitchen or whatever. But also, the other reason why they do this is because Tape Op never had a subscription. Their whole thing was, we're going to make a magazine we can afford to make based on advertiser revenue only. So if you knew about this, you wrote them and said, hey, I want to subscribe. And once a year, they send you a subscription renewal, and you do it. And I've been renewing for 20 years. I got 20 years of Tape Op Magazine here. And you read about a lot of different kinds of recording engineers, not just the guys that you'd find in Mix Magazine. You find a lot of the independents and stuff. It's a great magazine, but they're fully funded by the industry. I think that's where Modern Drummer has to go, or they've got to change their model. So apparently the drum industry is saying, well, we can sell our wares on Instagram and Facebook, and we don't need to sell it as much in a magazine. And because of that, Modern Drummer's been getting thinner and thinner and thinner. And guys like Chadwick have said, I don't need this anymore, and I'm not paying for it. And that becomes a problem. So is it worth it to you to have it? Like Tate's asking, is it worth it? Well, he's asking me, was the Danny Seraphin issue worth it? For me and you, Tate, probably it's worth it. Only because there are a few things I learned about his drum kits and stuff that we might have changed our mind and opinion on our show that we did here on Hanging with the Hammer, and we put out to the world as a separate little segment on Danny Seraphin's drum kits. He said a few things. I'm not even sure he's right, though, to be honest, because he said something about a 16 by 16 floor tom on that white kit. And I swear that his first interview, if you look in the magazine, he said he had a 14 by 14 floor tom. So I don't think Danny Seraphin's really knows all his kits from all those years, because he played so many kits. But the main kits, there was a couple interesting things he said in there, so I think it'd be worth it for you. But is everybody gonna spend $20? No, probably not, unless you're extreme Danny Seraphin nut. Plus, there's some cool transcriptions in it, and it's well done. It's a collector's item. And by the way, the new publisher, David Frangione, I think his name is, he's the guy that put together that book, Crash, which is a bunch of drum kits that he took photos of and turned into a coffee table book. I happen to own that book. I spent $36 for that book. I'm a guy that likes to collect this stuff. If you were to see my studio and you came down here and hung out in my studio, you would see I have 40 years of Modern Drummer, 20 years of Sound on Sound. I also have other drum magazines, Drums and Drumming, Drum Magazine. I stopped Drum Magazine around the time Chadwick stopped reading Modern Drummer. I kept Modern Drummer. Drum Head Magazine, which is probably my favorite magazine to read because Jonathan Mover writes like old style Modern Drummer long form articles, and I still subscribe to that magazine. I'm not sure I'm going to subscribe to Modern Drummer going forward. That's where we're going. So, anyhow, Claus says, absolutely get the issue that Terry is in. Well, that's the problem. Can you find this on a newsstand anymore? That's another problem. So how do you get this magazine? By the way, this says June on the cover, and it's July. But then again, they've been late the last 4 months. So I've called a couple times to find out about this. But that's the one that Terry's in. Terry and George is in it, by the way. There's a picture of George and Terry talking on another guy's YouTube channel. I forget his name. He's the psychologist dude. I've subscribed to him too. But let me see if I can find it. What's the guy's name? I'll hawk his channel. David Ward, Musicians on the Record. David Ward started doing interviews with guys like Terry and George, but he also did some really big guys too. He had some big guys early on. He was tracking with my subscriber rate. It's about the same as I have or less, but he knew people in the industry. That was the key. I've had a couple people like CCM Drummer ask me to go looking for some CCM drummers to ask them to come on. It's hard to contact people and cold call people and ask them to do things. I get that. I'm a little bit shy of doing those things. So I'm keeping it in the family here right now, but I did do something crazy before the beginning of this show. I kind of sent George Flutis a link to this if he wanted to pop in or not. So, but highly doubt that's going to happen. George is a great drummer and a working drummer in Chicago area and a great jazz drummer. And he's so much more than just the John Bonham guy, but he probably plays John Bonham better than anybody else out there that I know of. He knows everything about John Bonham. So wealth knowledge and great drummer, great jazz drummer. So let's see. Drumman 190, Matthew. Thanks for checking in. Hope I'm doing well. Yes, I'm doing well, and hope you're doing well. Congratulations on 6,000 subscribers, and I saw your little celebration drum cover. That was really cool. And maybe someday I'll be on your show. See where that goes. I'd love to do that. So the topic is the drum magazines or whatever you guys want to ask, because your questions make the show, and without questions I don't really have much of a show. So I'd love to get some of your questions sent to me. Let me say a couple more things about the Danny Serafin issue of this. Of course, the pictures are stellar in this magazine. That's what I mean about the production of the magazine is like a book. Some of the best pictures I've seen done in a magazine. So the new Modern Drummer's up 100% in the publishing notch. It went up a whole notch. I mean, it was losing it for a while there. But how many of these are new pictures? That's the question mark. You do get to see some of the kits, like the copper kit's really well seen on the one page. Danny's article was kind of cool. The new article about what he's doing is good. But there weren't a ton of new stuff, I did see how he mounted his little 10-inch tom on that black kit. So that was off of a Slingerland stand he was doing it. There's from that perspective, this is worth it, for the Danny Serafin nuts out there. And thank you, Matthew said you're going to make it happen. Looking forward to that. So, all right. So your questions make the show. Without questions, I don't have a show. Let me tell you a little bit about some of the other things I'm working on. I just got this harebrained idea. You guys all know about my idea for my grandkids. I'm doing lessons for my grandkids. I got another one coming out soon. The last one was on, I did on actually how to set up a drum. But I'm going to take your question, Chadwick, in 1 second. But the other thing I'm thinking about doing is I'm thinking about doing something with stories behind the gear and doing all my cymbals as individual stories. So, and going through my collections, like I got the Peisties, but I got a whole set of Sabians and where they came from and stuff. There's some interesting stories to all these things. And I'm thinking about doing some more of that and doing it in higher quality audio, meaning I'm going to use the studio mics. That's the biggest problem when I did my videos that got all the views, like the perfect ride cymbal video, which is one that guys just moan about, like, well, the sound is more sound. You're right, it is. I also had, about 45 subscribers at the time, so there was no way I even thought that was going to actually be something somebody's viewed 30,000 times. Had no idea about that. So that's one of the things I'm working on. Let's see. Chadwick asked, did you keep old MD vinyl demos in the centers of those issues? I have a few, but they're pretty scratched up. And I always hated them. But I had one on the other day. I think I found the one with Jeff Porcaro's cymbals from Peisty. I have that, but what he did with Page, I think, David Page. That's an interesting question. Thank you, Matthew. You like the lessons for the grandkids? Yeah, I got another one coming out next week. I got to do a few more of those. The next question is, what mics do you use and what's your recording and mixing process? Well, I got some videos on this one. So just to let you all know, I have a whole series of videos on how I go about it. But mics and how I place mics and things change from session to session to session. The only constant mics for me right now is Studio A, my main studio. I pretty much use the Sennheiser E604s on the toms, and occasionally I'll use an MD421 on the floor tom if I'm using 4 tom mics. This studio has 4 tom mics usually, which one of those mics can turn into a bottom snare mic or a front bass drum mic if I want to. But I generally use 8 mics in my setup for this studio and 8 mics in my setup for my concert tom kit in Studio B. The constants are the Studio A kick drum is a Beta 52 and the snare drum is an SM57 on the top. That's a constant. And the overheads in this studio right now are SM81s. So they are the Shure SM81s in a coincident miking pattern over top of the kit. Make it out there in Studio B, hodgepodge of microphones. I got a D112 in the kick drum. I could see I really just went to Bizarro land. Here I am. Sorry about that. Going back to the kick drum. Sorry that things are cutting, could be Comcast today. So Studio B kit's got a D112 as a kick drum mic and an SM57 for the snare drum. But then I've got a mix of mics on the toms. I had a question on the Instagram a few minutes before the show that came up where he asked me what I was using for the mics for that kit. So I had the 6 and the 8 up, the Octobon 8 concert tom, and I had an SM57 on that. And then inside the 10-inch tom, I had an SM58 vocal mic. And then in the other tom, I had one of my 8 Audio-Technica drum kit mics that I bought for $40 for the whole 4 microphones. So that's a $10 microphone in there if you kind of average it out. Sounds great, though, and works for that 13-inch tom. And then I had an Octava MK319 over the other toms, condenser mic. And then I've got Octava MK0112 Russian-made condenser mics over top the back of my head. Right over my head is where it kind of sits. So those are my mics. Everything's running through a PreSonus Studio 24x4x2 board. And I've got some boutique for circle audio preamps for my microphones in Studio A. Kick and snare are going through a API copy for the kick, a Neve copy for the snare, and 2 John Hardy copies, J99 copies for the overheads. I think that's the difference, to be honest, in the sound. So that's pretty much it. As far as mixing goes into DAW, I will tell you the difference that I do than you do, Matthew, in the DAW is I put the music in the DAW, so I record everything in the DAW, and I mix everything in the DAW. So that's the way I do it. I don't take the audio from the DAW and marry it to the drumless track. The drumless track is in there. What I do end up with is a stereo file of the music mixed in my template using my plugins, which I talk about extensively on this videos on how I make drum covers. And then I bring it into Final Cut. And that's where I marry the audio to the video is in Final Cut. And then that's a whole nother process, which I go into pretty heavily. Let's see. Claus says Modern Drummer usually has been available at Pressbrian here in Sweden. Sucks if you're going online only. They're not going online only. They are gonna still have a print copy, but it's gonna be a lot more money. The print copy is gonna be somewhere in the neighborhood of, I think, for you, maybe even more. Euros. I mean, you're probably talking like $12 or 12 euros probably. I know Canada is probably 11 euros. In the United States, it's going to be somewhere around $10. So per issue. But the subscription rates at this point in time, it looks like it's going to be 120 a year. I haven't got a subscription renewal notice from Modern Drummer yet. So I'm still on print copies, but when they send me that subscription renewal notice, it's going to be interesting to see what they send me for a deal. I had $30 for 12 issues, but I've been a subscriber since, I don't know, man, the 90s or 80s or something. So, I mean, I'm one of those long-term subscribers. I don't know what they're going to do for me. And if the cost is 120 a year, I'm not going to spend 120 a year in Modern Drummer. So I may get the online version, or I may just drop it like Chadwick did, be honest. I'm not sure I need it anymore. But if they're going to start featuring guys from YouTube, maybe I'll keep it. I don't know. Maybe I'll get featured. Sure. I actually have been in Modern Drummer magazine. I wrote an article for Modern Drummer in 1990, May 1990, the Don Henley issue. It was about club date drumming, doing wedding gigs, how to play basic beats for playing wedding gigs back in the 90s, 1990s. And then I was mentioned in a What's Happening kind of thing, being in the band Saved by Grace after we did that album in a short tour. So that's my big Modern Drummer entry is, and my wife was a magazine writer there. I think that's huge compared to me, to be honest. Thanks, Claude, for being on. Let's see. Drumman says, does adding the music in the DAW help a lot? It does, because of the way I have it makes it a lot easier to mix. Let's just put it that way. I think one of the reasons why my mixes sound the way they do is because they're mixed together in the DAW, not in Final Cut or iMovie. It's done in there. So I think it makes a huge difference. It goes through all my processing. The mixes, the 2-track mixes, which are really not 2-track mixes, they're really stems from extract stems. Can be separate stems. They all go through mus compression. I think it adds a lot to it. I think that's where my sound is, to be honest. And that's the key. That's the sound. That's the sound of my drum covers. And guys seem to like the sound of my drum covers. So, anyhow, any other questions? Thank you guys for being on today. It seems like a slow Saturday. 5 of you on today at any point in time. But I do appreciate those of you that drop in and are friends and hang out a little bit. Live streaming does seem to be the way things are going today. So, thanks, Matthew, for being on, hanging out of the show a little bit. Appreciate it. I will say that my Ask Girl show seems to get more viewers than the Hanging with the Hammer replay. But not many people are going to stick around for an hour-long show or an hour-and-a-half long show like we've had. But what I find in the live stream is that I have a lot more fun interacting with everybody and getting live feedback. So thank you all for watching my shows and hanging out. If you guys got any more questions, I'll stick around a little bit longer. And if not, we'll call it a day early. That's fine with me. I mean, I love being a part of this community, and I get a lot out of this. I will tell you, my greatest challenge right now is finding new music I want to play. That's my greatest challenge right now. One of these, I keep doing new covers every week, but I'm trying to figure out what to do next. You know what I mean? And I think I'm in a little bit of a lull right now. I'm not really inspired right now. So I'm looking for some inspiration. But thanks, Chadwick, for the thumbs up. I guess you got to move on, man. Have a great day and make some cool new music. I guess, what's the theme next month? Is it going to be boats, or are you going to do more roller coasters? That's what I really want to know for your green screen stuff. So maybe I can be ahead of the game and start doing that this week. As you notice, I'm doing very peaceful backgrounds on my green screen stuff. That's my thing these days. All right, guys. Anybody got a question? Any thoughts? You guys are all chill. Might be dated on the pool. You know what I mean? I do live in South Florida where the sun is wonderful and beautiful. And my it seems like my internet's doing a lot of really stupid things to you guys. I'll take another question if I got one. How are you finding your cover songs? Well, that's an interesting. I don't do what you do, Chadwick. I mean, you go to the top 40, and I mean, I think what you do is so unique, and that's why I'm really glad you're here, and I think you're really doing some cool things. Have a good weekend too, Matthew. Um, Fridays are going to be roller coaster days. That's cool. I think what you do is really cool because you're picking top 40. For me, it literally is I hear a song in a day and I go, oh, let me do that. Like I just did a song yesterday. It's been on my radar for years. It's a song called All All Would Envy is the song. All Would Envy. It's from a Chris Bodie album that I had. I forget what the name of the album is today, but he was playing kind of like smooth jazz tunes, and he did a Sting song, and he had a singer named Sean Colvin sing. And I always liked the song. The song is a story about an old guy marrying a really young chick, and the young chick can have anything she wants from the guy, but and everybody envies her. She's got this perfect life with perfect everything, and she doesn't have to do anything, but she's really bored to tears, and she's really not in love with the guy. And of course, it's one of those really sad songs when you really listen to the song, but it's got a really nice groove to it. So I did that yesterday. I just pocketed it 30 minutes, played it 4 or 5 times, and did it. And it'll get out one of these days. But there's some other Sean Colvin songs that came on my radar that I may decide to do now because did one of her songs. So that's kind of what happens is I hear something, I go, oh, I want to do that. And I put in a little list on my Spotify. And then I bring Spotify into Logic. And then I bring the Logic file into a WAV file. And then I put it into my extracts. And then I extract the drums and I play it. And there's really no rhyme or reason to any of the stuff I do. It's just really spur of the moment, what I'm thinking, what I'm hearing, what I'm listening to. And that's why it's all over the place. And a couple weeks ago, my wife said, can you do that song? And I said, sure, I'll do it. I did it. I like listening to all kinds of music. I listen to a lot of old CCM Christian music that I did when I was a kid. And, when CCM was kind of cool, I thought, it was different. It wasn't 70s and early 80s CCM is totally different than today's stuff. But I did one of today's stuff for my friend Michael Perry. That came out Friday. The problem is most people don't particularly like what I pick. I'm not picking it for the reason of getting views, apparently, because, I got you guys that watch me, but that's about it, So there's really, I don't have a formula, Chadwick. I just don't have a formula. If I had a formula, that'd be a different world, I think, but can't start now. How do you teach an old dog new tricks? My trick is just play as much as you can play and do as much as you can do and have as much fun as you can have. So I'm having a problem finding good songs to play right now, though. That's my problem. I'm not having fun. And there's certain songs that I'm afraid they're going to get blocked. Like I did John Lennon's Woman this week. I really want to do John Lennon Starting Over, but I'm going to have to work on that one a little bit. There's some really cool little fills that Andy Newmark played that I'd have to really kind of nail. But I didn't want to try that, work hard on a song when I could just knock out Woman in 10 minutes, which is literally what I did for that song. 10 minutes I played that song and filmed me, and it was over with. And I wasn't sure it was going to get up, and it got up. So I was like, wow, John Lennon got through. Okay, I could try another John Lennon then. It was original track, so I thought it may not get through. So I may do some more John Lennon. It all depends on what I think I can get through these days. And then I've got people that are always asking me to do stuff. Like I got guys asking me to do Carpenter songs all the time. Maybe one day I'll do some more Carpenters. So anyhow, your questions make the show. And Chadwick, you've been great today asking me questions. And thank you all for being on the show and hanging out with me today. I think we're going to make it an early day. We're making an early day today. Really did enjoy talking about the subjects I did, and go out and find that Modern Drummer magazine if you guys are interested in that one. And everybody have a great weekend. I'll see you again next week. No, I won't. Actually, next week will be Ask Girl Anything. So I have to do one of those this weekend too. I have some questions. Have a great weekend, guys. Bye.